Just before midnight on July 22, 1991, two police officers in Milwaukee were stopped by a man in distress. One of his wrists was still locked in a pair of handcuffs. At that moment, the officers had no idea that this strange encounter would uncover one of the most horrifying killers in American history. That night, fear spread quickly. People whispered in panic, calling him the devil. The man had escaped from a small apartment on North 25th Street. When officers followed him back there, what they discovered inside was beyond anything they could imagine. At first, they saw disturbing evidence, then body parts. One officer later said he heard a scream, only to realize it was his own voice. For years, no one suspected a thing. But behind closed doors, a 31-year-old man named Jeffrey Dahmer had been killing young men. Over 13 years, he murdered 17 victims. To him, death and violence did not bring the same shock most people feel. It had become part of his reality. The name Jeffrey Dahmer would soon become known around the world as a symbol of pure evil. Between 1978 and 1991, he lured victims, drugged them, and then took their lives. But what shocked people the most was what he did after the killings. Acts so disturbing they are still hard to comprehend. The first journalist to arrive at the apartment expected a scene of chaos. Instead, it looked almost normal. It was a simple one-bedroom space. A kitchen, a living room, a few dishes left in the sink. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance. But as officers searched deeper, the true horror hidden inside began to reveal itself. To understand how this happened, we must go back many years. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His family later moved to Iowa and then settled in Ohio. At home, things were far from peaceful. His parents argued constantly. Their relationship was filled with tension and emotional instability. Young Jeffrey often felt ignored, left alone while his parents dealt with their own problems. At school, he struggled to connect with others. He was seen as different, quiet, strange, and distant. When other children got hurt or cried, he showed little emotion. Sometimes he even laughed. It was clear that something wasn't right. Spending most of his time alone, Jeffrey began exploring the woods near his home. That's where his fascination with death began. It started with collecting insects. He would keep them in jars filled with chemicals. But over time, his curiosity grew darker. He began cutting open fish just to see what was inside. He became obsessed with understanding how bodies worked. This behavior escalated. Reports later revealed that he began harming animals, even going as far as killing and displaying them in disturbing ways. One boy from the neighborhood once found a dead animal in the woods, mutilated and nailed to a tree. What began as curiosity slowly turned into something much more dangerous. A deep obsession with death, control, and the human body began to take shape, an obsession that would later lead to unimaginable crimes. As Jeffrey Dahmer moved through high school, he found it harder and harder to fit in. To cope, he turned to alcohol at a very young age. One former classmate recalled that Dahmer would come to school carrying a cup, but it wasn't filled with tea or coffee. It was filled with strong alcohol. For a teenager, this was deeply troubling behavior. Looking back, many people wonder why no one stepped in. But at the time, things were different. A teenager drinking at school didn't raise the kind of alarm it would today. No one imagined what he would later become. In the summer of 1978, Dahmer's family finally broke apart. His parents divorced after years of constant fighting. The separation hit him hard. Both parents pulled him in different directions, each wanting him on their side. Caught in the middle, he felt confused, isolated, and emotionally drained. For many young people, this kind of stress leads them to withdraw, and that's exactly what Dahmer did. He retreated into himself, spending more time lost in his own thoughts and fantasies. Soon after graduating from high school, Dahmer found himself completely alone. His mother had moved away with his younger brother, and his father was living elsewhere. At just 18 years old, he was left by himself, isolated, drinking heavily, and sinking deeper into his imagination. Then, on June 18, 1978, everything changed. That day, Dahmer picked up a 19-year-old hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks. He invited him back to his home, offering drinks and a place to relax. At first, it seemed like a normal interaction. But when Hicks decided it was time to leave, something inside Dahmer snapped. Desperate not to be alone again, he attacked him. What followed was a brutal act of violence. Afterward, Dahmer disposed of the body in a calculated and disturbing way. The location he chose was not random. It was the same wooded area where he had once harmed animals as a child. This place held meaning for him, a dark connection between his past behavior and what he had now done. This moment marked a turning point. For the first time, Dahmer had taken a human life. What had once been fantasy was now real. And once that line was crossed, there was no going back. He now knew what he was capable of. After that first killing, something changed in him. He didn't stop. Instead, he became more comfortable with the idea of killing. What once may have felt unthinkable slowly became something he could repeat. Yet, despite this, Dahmer would not be caught for many years. It wasn't until August 1991, 13 years later, that his crimes finally came to an end, after one intended victim managed to escape from his apartment and alert the police. Once arrested, Dahmer confessed to the murders of 17 young men and boys. The man responsible for prosecuting him, District Attorney Mike McCann, struggled to find the right words to describe what Dahmer had done. He said the word evil is rarely used in court, but in this case, it felt unavoidable. The crimes were not just violent. They were deeply disturbing, committed against innocent strangers for moments of control and desire. As details of Dahmer's confession became public, the story spread quickly around the world. A leaked 38-page confession revealed the full extent of his actions, shocking the public and drawing massive attention from the media. After his first murder in 1978, Dahmer went nearly a decade without killing again. During that time, his life remained unstable. He dropped out of college after just one semester and continued drinking heavily. Eventually, his father pushed him to join the military. But even in the army, his struggles followed him. Stationed in Germany, he spent long periods alone, drinking excessively. One fellow soldier recalled that Dahmer would sit in his room all day, consuming alcohol and avoiding contact with others, even skipping meals. Dahmer's dependence on alcohol only grew stronger over time. By 1981, his drinking had become so severe that he was discharged from the army. With nowhere to go, he spent weeks wandering and sleeping on beaches in Florida before returning to Ohio. But his father had lost patience and sent him away to start over in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There, Dahmer moved in with his grandmother, the only person he seemed to have a somewhat normal bond with. But it was in that house that his dark path truly began to take shape. By 1986, Dahmer had already been arrested more than once for indecent exposure, including an incident involving children. Despite his struggles, he managed to get a job at a chocolate factory. Outside of work, he began visiting gay bars and bathhouses. At the time, being openly homosexual came with heavy stigma. For Dahmer, this created both shame and opportunity. Much of the social scene existed in secrecy, away from public view. And for someone like Dahmer, this hidden world made it easier to find victims without drawing attention. It was during this period that his violent urges returned. By September 1987, 9 years after his first murder, Dahmer was ready to kill again. But this time, his method had evolved. He no longer relied on sudden violence. Instead, he planned carefully. His goal was control. He didn't want victims to resist, argue, or leave him. He wanted them completely powerless. So he began approaching people in bars, starting conversations, and quietly learning about their lives. If someone had strong family connections, they were not his target. But if they were alone, cut off from family or support, Dahmer saw them as easier to disappear without notice. Between late 1987 and early 1988, Dahmer murdered 3 men. He developed ways to dispose of the bodies that made detection much harder. By using chemicals, he could destroy evidence and reduce the chances of identification. This showed just how calculated and methodical he had become. Some of these crimes took place inside his grandmother's home. She knew he was bringing men back, believing it was for private relationships. But she had no idea of the true horror happening behind closed doors, though she did complain about a strange, foul smell that she couldn't explain. In September 1988, Dahmer moved into his own apartment on North 25th Street in Milwaukee. Almost immediately, the attacks continued. He used drugs, often mixed into drinks, to weaken his victims, making them drowsy and unable to resist. On one occasion, a young boy managed to escape and report what had happened. Dahmer was arrested and later convicted, but he received a relatively short sentence. Even more shocking, While awaiting sentencing, he continued killing without anyone knowing. After serving less than a year in prison, Dahmer was released in 1990. Instead of stopping, his behavior became even more extreme. He wasn't just killing anymore. His actions grew more disturbing and ritualistic. Investigators later discovered that he had begun collecting parts of his victims, attempting to create something like a personal shrine. By this point, his method was refined. He would offer money to men to come back to his apartment, often under the promise of taking photographs or spending time together. Once there, he would give them a drink, secretly laced with drugs. When they lost consciousness, he would act without resistance. As they began to regain awareness, he would take their lives. It became clear that Dahmer's motivation was not just violence, but control and possession. He feared being alone more than anything. What might sound like a normal desire for closeness became something dark and literal in his mind. He wanted to keep people with him, permanently. His actions became more disturbing over time. He began experimenting in ways that showed a complete detachment from human life, attempting to control his victims even further. None of these attempts succeeded, but they revealed just how far his mind had drifted from reality. By 1991, Dahmer had reached the peak of his crimes. He had already taken many lives and continued living what appeared to be a normal life, working a regular job and blending into society. That was part of what made him so dangerous. He didn't stand out. He didn't draw attention. He looked like anyone else. At the time, no one realized a serial killer was operating in the city. Missing persons reports came in, but without clear evidence or bodies, it was difficult for police to connect the cases. But on May 26, 1991, everything almost came to an end. A young victim managed to escape from Dahmer's apartment after being harmed. For a brief moment, the truth was close to being uncovered. The young boy was completely naked, disoriented, and stumbling through the alley beside the apartment building. He looked confused, vulnerable, clearly in distress. A woman watching from a nearby building noticed him immediately. Sensing something was terribly wrong, she alerted others, and together they called the police. Moments later, Jeffrey Dahmer appeared on the scene. What stood out was his eerie calmness. Even under intense pressure, he remained composed, something often seen in individuals like him. He approached the officers politely, greeting them as if nothing was wrong. In a steady voice, he claimed the boy was his partner, explaining that they had been drinking and the situation had gotten out of hand. When questioned about the boy's age, Dahmer confidently stated he was 19. The officers, still unsure, decided to escort both of them back to the apartment to confirm the story. Inside, they did a quick inspection. At one point, they even glanced into the bedroom, unaware that a decomposing body lay nearby. Their search was brief, and nothing raised enough suspicion. Believing it was simply a domestic dispute, they left the boy in Dahmer's care. In the early hours of the morning, the 14-year-old victim was killed. It was a devastating missed opportunity, one that might have stopped everything. Some later argued that this moment reflected deeper issues at the time, including how authorities handled cases involving minorities, young people, and the LGBTQ community. Warning signs were overlooked, and what was happening behind closed doors remained hidden. With suspicion avoided once again, Dahmer continued his crimes. Experts later described two sides to his behavior. On one hand, there was a desire for control and domination, inflicting suffering. On the other, there was a disturbing fixation that extended beyond death itself. For him, control didn't end when life did, it began. That need for power, for complete ownership, became the driving force behind everything he did. By July 1991, his actions had escalated rapidly. In just over 2 weeks, he killed 4 more victims, bringing the total to 17. But the end was approaching. On July 22, 1991, Dahmer encountered a man named Tracy Edwards. Inside the apartment, Dahmer attempted to begin his usual routine, placing a handcuff on Edwards. But something was different this time. Edwards noticed disturbing signs. Hidden in the bedroom were Polaroid photographs, images capturing victims at different stages. Though not immediately obvious, they were enough to trigger alarm. Sensing danger, Edwards made a desperate move. He fled the apartment, running into the streets in nothing but his underwear, escaping what could have been another tragic outcome. This time, the story would end differently. When Tracy Edwards spotted a police car, His goal wasn't to expose a killer. He simply wanted help removing the handcuff locked around his wrist. That was all. He approached the officers and asked for assistance. As they began questioning him, his story raised concern. Sensing something wasn't right, they decided to investigate further and suggested returning to the apartment. Jeffrey Dahmer opened the door, but the moment he realized the police were there, his calm demeanor cracked. He tried to shut them out. The officers pushed their way inside. A brief struggle followed, but it didn't last long. Dahmer quickly gave up. In that moment, it was over. His years of killing had finally come to an end, and he knew it. As officers searched the apartment, the truth revealed itself in the most horrifying way. Human remains were discovered throughout the space. One officer later recalled hearing a scream, only to realize it had come from himself, reacting to the shocking sight before him. Dahmer offered little resistance as he was taken into custody. The investigation had officially begun. What followed was an explosion of media attention unlike anything the city had seen before. News spread rapidly as details from inside the apartment began to surface. At first, the reports sounded too extreme to be real. People questioned whether such horrors could truly exist. But as more evidence came to light, it became clear every detail was true. Inside the apartment, investigators uncovered chilling evidence. Body parts stored in a freezer, containers used to dissolve remains. A disturbing collection that left even experienced officials stunned. The medical examiner was so overwhelmed by the scene that additional teams were called in to assist. As word spread through police radio channels, media crews quickly arrived. What started as local coverage escalated within days. First national, then international. Footage showed items being removed from the building: barrels, containers, and appliances, each one tied to the crimes committed inside. The world watched in disbelief. Despite the growing evidence, the full scale of the crimes wasn't understood until Dahmer began to speak. At the police station, he confessed. In chilling detail, he described what he had done, crime after crime. Investigators later admitted that without his confession, the case would have been far more difficult to piece together. He admitted to multiple killings, often unable to recall the names of his victims. Yet he continued to provide information, sometimes even calling detectives later when he remembered new details. He claimed he wanted to help families find closure. Whether that was genuine or not remains a matter of debate. Unlike many killers, Dahmer showed signs, at least on the surface, of understanding the severity of what he had done. Some believed he felt a degree of remorse, while others questioned the sincerity behind it. But one thing was certain: the truth had finally come out, and the world would never forget it. As the terrified young boy stumbled through the alley beside the apartment building, he was completely disoriented and unclothed, clearly in distress. A concerned woman from a nearby building noticed him and immediately sensed something was wrong. She alerted others, and soon, the police were called. Moments later, Jeffrey Dahmer appeared on the scene. What stood out was his calmness. Despite the chaos, he remained composed, something often observed in individuals with psychopathic traits, even under extreme pressure. Approaching the officers politely, he explained that the boy was his partner, claiming they had simply had too much to drink and that the situation was a misunderstanding. When asked the boy's age, Dahmer falsely stated he was an adult. Trusting his explanation, the officers agreed to escort them both back to the apartment. Inside, the officers conducted only a brief and superficial check. Shockingly, they failed to notice the evidence of horror hidden within, including the remains of a previous victim in the bedroom. Believing it to be nothing more than a domestic dispute, they left the boy in Dahmer's care. That decision would prove fatal. In the early hours of the morning, the young boy was killed, an opportunity to stop a serial murderer tragically missed. This moment would later raise serious questions about systemic failures, bias, and missed warning signs that allowed such crimes to continue unchecked. With suspicion avoided once again, Dahmer continued his killing spree. Experts later explained that his motives were deeply complex. On one hand, he exhibited traits of sadism, deriving control and power over others. On the other, he displayed necrophilic tendencies, where his fixation extended beyond death itself. For him, control did not end when life did. By July 1991, his actions had escalated dramatically. Within just over 2 weeks, he claimed 4 more victims, bringing his total to 17. But his reign of terror was about to end. On July 22nd, Dahmer encountered a man named Tracy Edwards. After luring him back to his apartment, Dahmer attempted to restrain him with handcuffs, part of a disturbing pattern. Inside the apartment were photographs documenting his crimes, hidden but dangerously close to discovery. Sensing something was wrong, Edwards managed to escape. Running through the streets with a handcuff still attached, he flagged down police officers, not knowing he had just become the key to ending a nightmare. When officers returned to the apartment with Edwards, Dahmer attempted to block their entry. A brief struggle followed, but this time, he could not maintain control. Inside, officers discovered undeniable evidence: photographs, remains, and signs of unimaginable crimes. One officer later admitted that the shock was so overwhelming, he initially thought he heard someone else scream, only to realize it was himself. Dahmer was arrested on the spot. What followed was a media frenzy unlike anything seen before. As investigators removed evidence from the apartment, barrels, containers, and refrigerators containing human remains, the world watched in disbelief. The full extent of the crimes seemed almost impossible to comprehend. At the police station, Dahmer began confessing in detail. He described each crime with chilling clarity, even contacting investigators later when he remembered additional details, claiming he wanted to ensure nothing was left undisclosed. Despite the brutality of his actions, some noted that he appeared to show moments of awareness about what he had done, though whether this was genuine remorse remains debated. In court, the focus was not on whether he committed the crimes, that was undeniable, but whether he was legally sane at the time. His defense argued mental illness, while prosecutors emphasized the calculated nature of his actions. The trial captured global attention. Many were struck by how ordinary he appeared: quiet, composed, and unremarkable. Yet behind that facade was one of the most disturbing criminal histories ever recorded. Ultimately, the jury ruled that he was legally sane. He was sentenced to multiple life terms in prison, ensuring he would never walk free again. While incarcerated, Dahmer claimed to feel a sense of relief that he could no longer act on his impulses. He later turned to religion and was baptized in prison, though opinions remain divided on the sincerity of his transformation. On November 28, 1994, his life came to a violent end when he was attacked and killed by a fellow inmate. For some, it was justice. For others, it was simply another tragic chapter in an already disturbing story. The apartment where many of the crimes took place was demolished, but the legacy of Jeffrey Dahmer continues to haunt history. His story raises difficult questions about human behavior, missed warning signs, and the dark complexities of the human mind. In the end, his crimes remain among the most horrifying ever documented, real events that seem almost too disturbing to believe, yet undeniably true.